John Vodka. I work at Simpson Housing, and I sort of wear two hats at Simpson. I work two, sometimes three nights a week at our 66-bed men's and women's shelter in downtown Minneapolis, and then I also coordinate the volunteer meal groups. We put a hot meal on the table for our shelter guests 365 nights a year, and I'm responsible for making sure we have organizations, individuals, families, etc., to cook and serve a meal, prepare and serve a meal for our homeless shelter guests. Simpson Housing Services has been around for about a quarter century, 25, 26 years. We're located in South Minneapolis in a separate office building that is from our shelter, which is also in South Minneapolis. Our shelter sits in the basement of Simpson United Methodist Church on the corner of 28th Street and First Avenue South, and it has been in operation since 1981. The church actually opened its basement to folks who were experiencing homelessness 30 years ago, thinking it would be a very temporary phenomenon, and here we are 30, 31 years later. And I think in Minnesota now there's somewhere between 13 and 15,000 people every day, every night who are experiencing homelessness in our state, and probably half that number here in the greater metro area. And there aren't enough shelter beds for a lot of these folks, especially youth who are 16 to 21 years of age. Our shelter is just for single adults or adults without children. And as I said earlier, we have 66 people who sleep inside in our basement shelter every night, 44 of whom are men and 22 of whom are women, and they sleep separately in the basement. We have had a number of your student colleagues volunteer with us over the years. It's been a wonderful gift to Simpson, and I hope to the folks that have done the volunteer work for us. And so what I'm here to talk about is the particular position we have open, which is an overnight volunteer position at our men's and women's shelter. And essentially what that means is we're only open from 6 p.m. until 7 a.m. the next morning. And we're just an overnight shelter. We don't have day shelter. So our homeless guests will arrive, will come into the building at 6 o'clock, and then they're asked to leave at 7 the next morning. We have staff there all night. We have one staff person who stays through the night, but others of us work from mid-afternoon until 10 or 11 o'clock at night. Volunteers, which is what you would be, an overnight volunteer would essentially be asked to come at 5:45 in the evening. The guests come in at 6, and then you would be there until 7 o'clock the next morning. We try to have two volunteers working side by side overnight each night, and that means that as a volunteer you would get to sleep at least 4 hours sometime during that night. Usually the volunteer sleep shift is from one person sleeps from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. and the other sleeps from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. Your responsibilities are varied. You'd always be working with a staff person. You definitely would start out working with someone who's been volunteering quite a while as well. And your duties would be to just greet guests as they come in, make sure there's coffee and other beverages available throughout the evening. We have a supper meal, as I said, at 7 o'clock each evening, and you'd be involved in just visiting with guests, relating to them as you are comfortable with that. We have a supply room that we open every night with toiletries and underwear and other things that any of us would need were we experiencing homelessness, and you'd be helping to manage that supply room, usually with one other person in the supply room with you, and then just essentially just being an extra set of eyes and ears throughout the evening, to help manage the shelter throughout that evening. And then we have a cold breakfast. Sometimes we have groups that come in really early in the morning and fix a hot breakfast for our guests, but most often it's a cold breakfast, and so our overnight volunteers are responsible for getting the cereal and the milk and the juice and whatever else we have to serve our guests that morning, to get that out and available between 4 and 5 o'clock in the morning, and our guests are kind of getting up between that time and 6 o'clock when we wake everybody up. So that, and then minimal cleaning, just kind of policing the grounds for coffee cups and discarded paper and stuff like that. So that's essentially what you'd be doing. The benefits, or at least there are many benefits, and as Monica mentioned, one of the volunteers from Normandale is actually working with us now as an overnight staff person. So there is that possibility. But I guess the benefits in my mind are that you experience homelessness up close, and you kind of get out of your comfort zone. And I think that's important for all of us to experience if we haven't been around folks who've experienced homelessness or are in dire poverty situations, to be up close to that, and maybe even to begin to be in relationship with folks who are experiencing that. Many of our guests like to be in conversation with newcomers and people that they haven't seen before, and to get your experiences and your life's history as you're comfortable in giving that. It's obviously a direct service learning opportunity where you're interacting with people that we're serving. It's something that you can add to your resume, as Monica said. To indicate that you have volunteered is an important thing for prospective employers to look at and to know that you've been doing. We certainly would be glad to give references to people that you're interviewing with. And one overnight volunteer shift is 13 hours, so you can kind of knock out a lot of service learning hours in one fell swoop. What we do require of you is a minimum of 4 shifts during a 6-month period. We'd love for you to do more than that. We don't want anybody volunteering overnight more than once a week, so you can space it out over that period of time. The process is just you would, if you're interested, you would contact us or go online and see the online application, fill that application out. You'd then get a phone call from either myself or my colleague Christina Giese. We'd set up a time to interview you over the phone. We would then, if you were interested and we were interested in you, we would then get you into the shelter for a 2-hour training, just to introduce you to the shelter, answer any questions you might have, and then you would do a shadow shift. Your first shift would be with 2 other volunteers and our staff, so that you could kind of get your feet wet, and then you could go online and pick whatever dates are open to start your shift. The overnight, the training and the shadow shift count toward your hours of service learning as well. So that's it. Any questions? And I'll just point out, I've been working on staff at the shelter for a little over a year now, and I started as an overnight volunteer there too. So it was a really important and powerful experience for me. Thank you all.